Natasha and Her Illegitimate Child in a Muslim Society. A novel by Dr. A. Ahmed. Book 2. This is an intriguing epic story which resonates with love, resilience, courage, and sacrifice. Before we dive into the tapestry of the story, I would like to remind the reader that this novel has been narrated in 2 books. Copyrights. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author, except by a reviewer, who may quote brief paragraphs for a review to be printed in a public newspaper, general magazine, school journal, or university article. This novel is a work of fiction, but the entire story is based on the real life of a Muslim family. All names, characters, places, and events are either the product of the author's imagination or used literary. Therefore, any resemblance to actual people, living or dead, events, or locales is merely coincidental. Chapter 1. Everything is different in the Muslim world. Although the distance between Canada and Sudan could be traveled by plane in a few hours, the person who has never been to a Muslim country before would feel as if he has landed in a dwelling habitat of Muslim people living in the 7th century AD. From the international airport, he would see everything is different and many things may not make sense to him. There are different laws, different people, and different houses. The laws are based on the teachings of the Quran and the hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad. People in a Muslim country look differently due to their clothes in the case of the women and long beards of men. Every woman must cover her body with an Islamic hijab and jilbab or abaya, and only her face could be seen. Some women dressed up in niqabs or burqas, and nothing could be seen of them as if they are moving tents. Children might mistake such a fully concealed human being for a ghost. Besides the compulsory Islamic clothes, women are strictly forbidden by law from walking in the streets without their husbands or male muhrim, such as her father, brother, or grown-up son. The policemen are authorized by the law to do random checks on the identities of any couple seen walking together in the street. If the couple failed to prove their relationship to each other, such as husband and wife, daughter and father, grown-up son and his old mother, or sister and brother, then they would be arrested and charged of a serious offense called al-sharua fi al-zina, which means starting to commit adultery. To put it more accurately, we might translate that crime as beginning to have sex or committing fornication. This crime should not be confused with kissing or hugging in a public place. A kiss or a hug in a public place is considered a real sexual intercourse, and the punishment would be 100 lashes plus financial charge because it is sex done openly. We must call to mind the case of the European couple who were caught kissing each other on a beach in Dubai and convicted of committing sexual intercourse in public. According to the Sharia, the punishment for the couple who failed to prove their lawful relation, matrimonial, parental, or sibling, would be scourging 40 lashes. The woman who is caught putting trousers would also receive 53 lashes. We could remember in this regard the case of the Sudanese female journalist, Labna Abdulaziz, who was picked up by the cops from a wedding hall for putting on trousers. Moreover, the woman who speaks loudly in a public place would get on her buttocks those painful strikes too. There are many more feminine offenses that lead to over 50 lashes, but those are the most common. One last crime I would like to mention before we move to the building of the Muslim house. It is the feminine crime of revealing the hair in a public place. If for any reason a woman exposes her hair or part of her head in public, she would be picked up by the cops and get scourged immediately. By the way, this is the only crime that does not require a judge and a trial. If a person saw a girl revealing her hair or even a single hair on her head and informed the cops, then that disobedient young woman would be arrested and taken aside and whipped by the so-called correctional police officers of Allah without detaining her. She would be allowed to go free as soon as she received those 53 lashes on her back and buttocks. Now, let us talk about the Muslim home. For someone who has not been to a Muslim country, he may not know how the Muslim house is built. Every Muslim house is divided equally into the men's section and the women's section. The division is observed as strictly as the public washrooms, ladies and men. The 2 sections are separated by a partition as secure as the Iron Wall of Berlin or the Great Wall of China. The The two sections could be called two separate houses. In the middle of the wall, there is a small door. Only the father or the brothers have the authority and power to open and use that door. Women are strictly forbidden at any time and under any circumstances to cross their boundaries and enter the men's section. Each section has its own door, rooms, furniture, toilet, bathroom, etc. The bathroom in the Muslim world is not one unit where the person can take a bath and do the other job. For religious purification, the bathroom must be for taking a bath and performing ablution only, whereas the toilet is meant for getting rid of human refuse, such as urine and feces. The women's section has in addition a kitchen. In that society, it is a big shame for a man to cook his food or even make tea. From time immemorial, it has never been heard of one day, and under any circumstances, that men entered the women's section or women risked their lives by venturing into the men's section. Those divisions are believed to be divinely ordained by Allah and His beloved Prophet Muhammad, hence are strictly followed and practiced by Muslims wherever they are living on the planet Earth. Chapter 2. Natasha's first day in Sudan. Natasha noticed the huge difference between the life she left behind in Canada and what is awaiting her ahead in Sudan as soon as her plane left Heathrow International Airport in London and headed towards Khartoum. During her 8 hours flight from Toronto to London, everything looked familiar to her: the people, their clothes, language, and behaviors. As soon as she boarded the Sudanese airplane, she began to see the huge differences. All women inside the plane, including the air hostesses, are wearing the Islamic hijabs and jilbabs, which covering their bodies from head to feet except for small parts of their faces. Some women are fully wrapped up with the Islamic niqabs or burqas, and nothing could be seen of them except they appeared as ghost-like bodies. Men are having long beards and look like the terrorists of ISIS, Al-Qaeda, or the so-called holy fighters of Taliban, or the mujahideen of Boko Haram who appear every now and then on TV whenever there is news of suicidal bombings in Syria, Iraq, Nigeria, Somalia, Afghanistan, or Pakistan. Men also look somber and serious, and some of them seem to be angry. Women speak rarely, and that in a whisper. Only their children seem to be happy and allowed to talk. When she applied for her visa at the Sudanese consulate in Toronto, Natasha was given a long list of things she should not do and what kinds of clothes she should wear while she is living in a Muslim country. She was told that she would not be allowed to wear trousers, shirts, and pants. She should not have a boyfriend or befriend any male. If she dared to do any of those taboos, she would be arrested, tried, severely punished, and deported to Canada as soon as possible. Consequently, prior to boarding her plane in London, Natasha removed her Western dress and put on an Islamic hijab and jilbab, which she bought from a Pakistani Muslim fashion shop in Toronto. When she looked at her image in the mirror, she despised herself. Natasha wanted to bring her Holy Bible with her, but her brother Wahid stopped her from committing such a dangerous mistake. He reminded her of the case of the two Westerners who were caught with the Holy Bible in their luggage in the international airport in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and what had happened to them. In her case, she would be executed for sure because she is pretending to be a Muslim, and being caught red-handed with a Bible is worse than apostasy. However, what worried Natasha are not those restrictions, but the main problem she anticipated is what would the reaction of her Muslim relatives when they come to know who she is. Would they accept her and treat her like a daughter or reject and kick her away when they come to know who she is, an illegitimate daughter? Natasha has little information about her Sudanese relatives. She knew that they were living in a city called Wadi Madani and that their family name was Shams al-Din. Such little information she learned through her late grandfather, Dr. Sami Shams al-Din. She has no address or phone number of any one of her relatives. Her real troubles began as soon as she landed in the Khartoum International Airport. Firstly, no taxi driver is ready to accommodate a woman who has no husband, father, or brother accompanying her. Luckily, a Western couple understood her insurmountable problem and proposed to take her with them to the hotel in their hired cab, which fitted with a taxi meter. At the hotel, Natasha has been denied accommodation because she came alone without a close male relative with her. The hotel management informed her that no hotel in Khartoum would allow her to check in as a single woman. It is strictly prohibited by the Sudanese law that in no uncertain terms a single woman, whatever her age, and whether she is a Sudanese or foreigner, to be given a room in a hotel. Although the kind white couple who brought her in their taxi from the airport suggested that Natasha could stay with them in their room until the next day, the hotel authority rejected their kind offer. Nevertheless, Natasha has not been fully convinced that all hotels in Khartoum follow that gender discriminative law. She requested the white couple to drive her in their taxi to another hotel. The kind couple agreed to help her with that too. Ultimately, after checking on the other 3 hotels and getting the same result, Natasha understood that she could not stay in any hotel as a single female. She then asked the taxi driver of the white couple to take her to the YWCA, or any guest house in Khartoum. The cabbie told her there is not any guest house or hostel in the capital city that is open for single females. Moreover, he said there is no such thing called Young Women Christian Association in Sudan. Finally, when all doors of hotels and motels have been shut on her face, the Canadian girl requested the kind Western couple to drop her at the Wadi Madani bus station so that she could resume her trip to the city of her Sudanese relatives. At the bus station, Natasha faced another unbeatable problem. But it isn't as serious as the previous ones that she faced at the Khartoum International Airport when she tried to hire a cab as a lone girl, and at the hotels and motels when she wanted to stay alone in a room as a single woman. She is told that she could travel alone on the bus, but at her risk. In plain words, the bus driver warned her that, if she traveled alone and the highway police intercepted the bus and did a check, she might be kicked out of the bus and most probably arrested for traveling without a male muharram. According to the Sharia law, a woman is not permitted to travel anywhere or goes out of her house without her husband or a male muharram. A muharram, for those who are not on the knowledge, is a close blood relative that the woman cannot marry or fornicate with him, such as her biological father, brother, grandfather, or grown-up son. However, her father-in-law or brother-in-law and other male-in-laws are not muharram. Yet, there is another technical problem the Canadian girl faced inside the bus before the journey began. Natasha is told she will not be allowed to sit near any man inside the bus, because that is against the Islamic Sharia law and might stir up the righteous wrath of other pious Muslim passengers. She could sit near another woman, but since practically no Sudanese woman could travel alone, she is required to buy 2 tickets so that no man could occupy the seat near her. When Natasha purchased her 2 tickets and entered inside the bus, she felt the eyes of the male passengers are staring at her and searching her body from head to her feet as if they are arrows directed against a single stray deer. They made her feel as if she were a bare-naked street girl or a prostitute who had walked inside the bus. Any man thought that he has the right to lust after her body or sleep with her for little money. Even so, due to her long journey from Canada to Sudan and her fatigue due to lack of proper sleep, Natasha has gone to sleep on her 2 seats as soon as the bus has begun to move. Chapter 3. The conditions of the Eritrean and Ethiopian refugees in Sudan. By the time Natasha arrived in her motherland, there are over 1 million Eritrean and Ethiopian refugees in Sudan. Those refugees cross the border every day and enter the Sudanese soil. They walk on foot for many days and weeks before they reach the Eritrean-Sudanese border. On their way, they are without any kind of proper food to eat and water to drink. Most of them walk barefooted and with little rags of torn clothes on their bodies to protect them from the burning sun of Africa. Many of them would die on the way due to a lack of food and unwholesome water. Some of them would be killed by wild beasts and poisonous snakes and scorpions. Little children would turn into skeletons with big heads. When you see them, they resemble ghost-like creatures. Old folks and young ones would appear like people who are buried, exhumed, and came out of their graves. They are hard to be accepted as human beings. Most of the social workers of the UN are scared to touch them or come near them. Every now and then death claims many of them. As soon as those miserable refugees entered Sudan, the UN officials would receive them and keep them in camps. There are 2 types of camps, the emergency camps and the settlement camps. The emergency camps are built near the Sudanese-Ethiopian border. Those who survive death there are put into the emergency camps. After 2 months, when they have received proper food and medical care, they will be transferred to the settlement camps. Those camps are located near big towns and cities. According to UN regulations, those refugees are not allowed to go out of the camps unless they receive written permission from the police authorities inside their camps. Permission would be granted to those refugees who have genuine reasons to move out of their camps. Medical permission is the only acceptable one. Those who have serious injuries or are suffering from contagious diseases might be allowed to go to the nearby city and get treated in a hospital. Such permissions should not exceed 3 weeks. If a refugee is found out of the camp without official permission, he would be arrested by the Sudanese police and sent back to his camp. The camp's life might be suitable for those Eritrean refugees who came from villages and small towns. However, the city people find the refugee camp's life to be very boring. There is not any kind of entertainment. From morning to evening, the refugees will be standing in long queues waiting to receive their food and medications. Otherwise, the time would be spent sitting near their tents or small huts. This kind of life would not be accepted by high schools and university students. Those young refugee boys and girls always try to run out of the camps and enter big cities. There they would seek work to meet their needs. As soon as they collected enough money, they would move to Khartoum City. When they arrive in the capital city of Sudan, they go to foreign embassies and apply for resettlement in countries like the USA, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia. While they are moving from place to place, those young refugees would face many problems. Some of those problems are caused by the local citizens and some by the Sudanese police authority or military soldiers. Whenever those refugees fall into the hands of the police authorities or military soldiers, they would be detained and threatened with being sent back to their camps. If the refugee happened to be a boy, then he would be forced to purchase his freedom by paying some amount of money as a bribe. If she is a girl, then she would be compelled to redeem her freedom by offering her body for sexual satisfaction. Even those girls and boys who have obtained official permission papers to move out of their camps, still the Sudanese authorities would find fault in those documents. Then they would be detained in lonely police checkpoints on the highway or military bases. If they refuse to empty their pockets and offer their bodies for sex, then they would be physically tortured and raped. Of course, such evil practice could not be generalized to include all police officers and military men, but the majority of the policemen and military soldiers do it. Besides that, most of the young girls would work as maidservants in Sudanese houses. They would be sexually harassed and abused by the male members of those houses. If they refused to provide sex, they would be kicked out of their work. Sometimes, those hapless refugees would be raped by their employers. When they go to complain to the police, they might be raped by the police officers, or their complaints be rejected due to lack of evidence. There is no such thing in Sudan called the DNA tests to prove their rapes. Those are the dire conditions of the Eritrean and Ethiopian refugees in Sudan when the Canadian tourist Natasha arrived in her fatherland. Most of the sex victims in Sudan are those refugee girls. Just a few kilometers away from the city of her relatives, Wadi Madani, Natasha has been awakened out of her sleep when the rough hands of a man have violently shaken her and woke her up. She forced herself to open her half-sleeping eyes and viewed the face of the person who was talking to her in a harsh voice. He looked like the devil who manifested himself in a khaki uniform. The frightened Canadian girl immediately recognized him as a policeman because she had seen many police officers in the international airport and in the streets of Khartoum. "What is your name?" shouted the policeman at the sleepy Natasha. "My name is Natasha Shamsaldeen," responded the Canadian girl. "Where are your permitting papers?" asked the policeman. "Which papers, sir?" "Your permission to move out of the refugee camp." "I am a Canadian tourist girl. I have my passport and visa." The policeman looked suspiciously at Natasha and then demanded that she should show him whatever identification documents she is carrying on her. By then Natasha became fully awake. She was shocked when she could not find her handbag lying near her. She searched everywhere for it, but she could not find it. She became exceedingly scared when she discovered that someone had stolen her handbag while she was sleeping. All her documents and money had gone with her stolen purse. She began to ask the passengers around her whether any one of them has seen her handbag or seen the person who has taken it. Every passenger said he has no idea where her handbag has gone. Natasha tried to convince the policeman that she was having her handbag lying on the next seat near to her when she fell asleep due to her fatigue and long trip from Canada to Sudan. The policeman refused to believe her words and accused her of lying. He said to her that her Arabic accent revealed that she is an Ethiopian or Eritrean refugee girl who ran away from her camp without police official permission. Firstly, it is true that Natasha has an Ethiopian or Eritrean accent when she speaks Arabic due to her upbringing in Ethiopia and her knowledge of the two official languages of Ethiopia and Eritrea, Amharic and Tigrinya. Secondly, due to her light skin color and long hair, she looks like an Ethiopian girl rather than a dark-skinned Sudanese girl. Natasha's late grandmother Nadia Alexandrov was Russian, and her late father Sheikh Yasser Sef al-Din was an Arab Sudanese, and that combination made her look like a foreigner. Consequently, the Sudanese police officer has mistaken her for an Ethiopian refugee girl who ran away from her camp without official permission papers. Therefore, when the Canadian girl has failed to prove her identity through her passport or any other identification papers, she has been forced to get down from the bus and placed under arrest. Chapter 4. Natasha in a police detention. The most dangerous creature in the third world is the policeman, and the most vulnerable person in the Muslim countries is the woman. It is almost impossible for the young woman to step out of her house without a male protecting her and not falling sex prey in the hands of the policeman. Every young woman found in a public place without her father, brother, or husband is considered a bad girl or a prostitute. Men tease and sexually harass her and follow her as hungry wolves chasing a deer or like stray dogs following a bitch. If she tries to talk to them or stop them from following her, that would give them more assurance that she is a bad woman, because the morally good woman must not supposed to speak to male strangers in public. However, those men just harass the girl by calling her bad names. They might not attack her or try to rape her in broad daylight. If she is walking all alone in the streets during the night, then they would not only gang rape her, but they might also murder her as well. Nevertheless, if that girl has fallen into the hands of the cops, then she would not escape unharmed by them. They would detain her under the serious charge of being a street girl or a hooker and then take her to their police station and gang rape her. As we mentioned before, the most vulnerable victims in Sudan are the Eritrean or Ethiopian refugees. Those refugees are often got raped in their camps by the military soldiers who's supposed to protect them and the UN workers who's supposed to serve them. If the refugee girl has a father, husband, brother, or other relatives with her inside the camp, then she might escape that kind of abuse and harassment. However, if she dared to step out of her camp all alone, she would fall prey in the hands of the Sudanese police. Some Sudanese policemen boast among their friends and relatives about the number of refugees that they slept with. That fateful day, the Canadian girl Natasha has fallen helpless prey in the hands of some of those wicked policemen. She has been arrested and detained in a solitary highway police checkpoint. When she was taken inside the police station, she found a couple of refugee girls. Natasha tried to communicate with them in Arabic, but neither of the two girls speaks Arabic. From their conversation, she understood that they are Ethiopian girls. Both detained girls are speaking to each other in their mother tongue, which she could speak too. Immediately, she introduced herself to them in Amharic language and began to inquire about their charges, which made them detained in that police checkpoint. The two girls admitted that they ran away from their refugee camp without police permits and tried to smuggle themselves into the capital city with the hope that they might obtain visas to go to Canada. They said they have relatives in Toronto City. Natasha astonished them when she claimed that she had just arrived yesterday in Sudan, and she had come all the way from Canada. The two refugee girls found it difficult to believe that Natasha has come all the way from the paradise of Canada to the hell of Sudan. Then she informed her two inmates how she got robbed of her handbag, along with her passport and money. The Ethiopian girls said to her, as a single girl so far, she had experienced the least evil that a young woman is destined to face in that accursed Muslim country called Sudan. They said they are Orthodox Christians. Then they narrated in tears their many sad stories about how often they were beaten and raped by the Muslim policemen, Sudanese military men, and local civilians. They said further that every Sudanese believes that each and every Ethiopian and Eritrean girl is a prostitute. Shortly after her arrest, the Canadian girl has been harshly interrogated by her detainers. Unfortunately, Natasha's ability to speak fluently Amharic language assured the policeman that she is truly an Ethiopian refugee girl who ran away from her refugee camp in eastern Sudan. When she continued to deny that accusation and insisting that she is a Canadian girl who came as a visitor to Sudan, the cops mercilessly hammered her. It was towards the evening when Natasha was pulled out of that bus and kept inside a lockup room. Being new in that Muslim country, she has no clue what those cops are planning to do to her and the other two refugee girls. She thought she had been arrested due to some misunderstanding, and she would sooner or later be released when her identity would be verified. She also thought that the Sudanese police, like the Canadian police, will release her when that misunderstanding is cleared. Moreover, she expected that she might be sent back to Khartoum, or the police would contact either the Sudanese airline or a Western embassy to verify her claim. Natasha knew there is no Canadian embassy in Sudan. She was told by the Sudanese consulate in Toronto that, if she needed any help, she could contact either the British embassy or the American embassy in Khartoum. With those positive thoughts in mind, the Canadian girl Natasha went to sleep as soon as night fell. She is still dead tired and needed enough rest to overcome her fatigue and exhaustion. However, her sleep has been disturbed at midnight when a couple of policemen walked inside their darkroom. They are carrying their torches in their hands. The two police officers are in their uniforms. Without uttering a word, they walked in and began to carry out their evil intentions. They appeared like two black demons to the Canadian tourist. The Canadian girl could not believe her eyes when she saw one of those cops sat near one of the Ethiopian girls and began to touch her body. Her astonishment reached beyond comprehension when she saw the other cop sitting near the other refugee girl and began to hug and kiss her. What troubled Natasha is that those two Ethiopian girls are not resisting or refusing such improper touches on their bodies. The Canadian girl became angrier with those two girls than with the policemen. She began to shout at them in their Ethiopian language and ordered them to stop those wicked cops from sexually harassing them. One of the Abyssinian girls replied and tried to justify her complicity. She told Natasha that they are girls and strangers in this Muslim country, and therefore they could do nothing to stop those Sudanese policemen from having sex with them. The other complicit girl said to the Canadian girl by agreeing for sex that is the only way they could be released and allowed to continue smuggling themselves to Khartoum. Natasha rejected their silly excuses and rebuked them. However, none of them gave heed to her reproaches. When she failed to convince the two refugee girls, Natasha began to shout at the two policemen. She told them they are not supposed to take advantage of those innocent foreign girls and sexually abuse them. Then she reminded them they are the men of the law and supposed to protect them. The two policemen ignored Natasha's words and went ahead with their evil acts. Natasha could not believe her eyes when she witnessed in front of her eyes those wicked cops having sex with those two refugee girls. Surprisingly, none of those cops tried to touch her that night. On the following morning, the two refugee girls had been taken in a police car and smuggled to Khartoum. As soon as the two girls left, Natasha began to worry about her safety inside the darkroom where she had been detained. The same two policemen, like the voracious hyenas, waited for the night to fall so that they could feast on the body of their apprehended deer. They are the only two police officers in that isolated detention place. That night, the Canadian visiting girl Natasha has been brutally raped by those two evil policemen. On the following day, those same two policemen drove her in their police vehicle to the city, which she told them before where she wanted to go to. When Natasha reached her city, she threatened the policemen that she would lodge a complaint against them. They mocked her and challenged her to go ahead and submit a lawsuit against them. They sarcastically said to her that she would not be able to prove anything against them. Chapter 5. Natasha meets her Sudanese relatives. Many years had passed since a girl in the city of Wadi Madani was illegally impregnated twice before marriage and brought great shame to her parents and their relatives by delivering illegitimate babies twice out of adultery. That misfortunate girl was arrested by the police of Khartoum, tried by the Sharia court, and convicted of committing adultery twice and flogged to death. However, after many years, the people of that city stopped talking about that scandal and hardly mentioned the name of that girl anymore. A new generation of young boys and girls were born and grew up, and the old folks died. None of that new generation knew about that disgraceful girl. However, their grandparents, who are still alive and kicking, have not forgotten the girl who defiled her family's name and filled the heads of her tribe with dust and ashes. Although those old folks knew about the so-called fallen girl and knew she gave birth to 2 illegitimate babies, no one knew what had happened to the so-called 2 illegitimate children. They do not even know what the gender of those 2 unwanted babies is. How those 2 illegitimate children were raised and who were the people who brought them up, no one has a clue. What happened in Canada to those 2 children is not known to anyone in that city. Even the relatives of the so-called bad and disgraceful girl who got killed by the Sharia court knew nothing about those 2 illegal children. They considered that chapter was closed forever after the cousins of that girl made 2 attempts to cleanse the family's honor from the scandal. Although those murderers received short imprisonment terms on their second attempt, none of them spent more than a couple of years in prison. As it is the well-known custom in the Muslim countries, every Eid celebration the presidents of those countries would set free all prisoners, including the most notorious criminals and murderers and terrorists, as a token of blessing from Allah. Those murderers or performers of honor killing were received by their families as heroes or brave soldiers returning from the battlefield when they returned to their city of Wadi Madani. Later, they got married and had sons and daughters. No one in that city would ever dare to mention that scandal in front of those murderers without putting himself in great danger. Notwithstanding, after many years, that supposedly cleansed and buried nasty scandal has resurrected again and come to life in flesh and blood when Natasha arrived one day in the city of Wadi Madani and searched for her Muslim relatives. It did not take long before some people recognized the name of the family she was looking for and directed her to her great-grandparents' house. Her great-grandparents died many years ago, but their grandchildren are still alive. Fortunately, those who are still alive have not recognized Natasha, believed her story, and allowed her to stay. The family with whom she came to stay consisted of an old mother and her daughter-in-law. The husband of that daughter-in-law, who is also the son of that old woman, died a couple of years ago in a holy jihad war against the southern Christian infidels in the south of Sudan. He was a military soldier and got killed by the southern rebels during one of the deadly battles between the so-called troops of Ar-Rahman and the infidel rebels. Ar-Rahman, one of the beautiful 99 names of Allah in the Quran. His wife and mother believed that he died as a martyr and hence he is in paradise, and God wedded him with 72 virgins. On the day the mother and his wife received the news of his death, they shouted the ululation of joy, and many women came and congratulated them for the honorable martyrdom of Tariq Hassan Shams al-Din. The so-called martyr did not survive by any child because his wife Shama is barren. The death of Tariq, who used to be the only source of income, is a great loss for the family. As a young woman, Shama could not work, and as an old woman, her mother-in-law is also staying at home. The 2 family members surviving on a little pension they are receiving from the government. Therefore, the arrival of the Canadian girl seemed to have added to the problem rather than solved it. She is also young and hence would not be expected to work. Natasha lost her travel checks on the day her handbag was stolen from her inside that accursed bus. To shed more light on that poor family, the old woman is in fact one of the many cousins of Natasha's late grandfather, Dr. Sami Shams al-Din. He was the one who took her from the women's prison in Sudan when she was 2 days old and fled with her to Ethiopia and raised her up there. Later, the 2 immigrated to Canada, where she accidentally met her brother Wahid and unwittingly fell in love with him and married him and have a daughter together who is called Nadia Muhammad Ahmed. The cousin sister of Natasha's late grandfather is called Haja Fatima, and her daughter-in-law is Shama Yasser Sef al-Dawla. She lost her husband after she got her son, Tariq Hassan Shams al-Din. No one had come to marry her after her husband died of cancer. From a young age, her son began to work to support his widowed mother. When his hands became strong enough, he joined the Sudanese army. He was a deeply religious boy and joined the notorious Muslim terrorist group that euphemistically known as the Muslim Brotherhood when he was 14 years old. His heart desire, which supposedly his Allah had fulfilled, was to die in jihad against the infidels. Although Natasha's presence is considered another burden by the poor old woman and her daughter-in-law, soon that belief has changed. Natasha was able to contact her brother in Canada and informed him about what had happened to her on her first day in Sudan. She requested him to send her some money. Wahid agreed to send money every month to his sister. Natasha informed her brother how she had been sexually abused by some highway policemen on her arrival in Sudan. Wahid is exceedingly outraged when he learned that his sister was brutally gang-raped by 2 Sudanese policemen. He told her to contact any Western embassy in Khartoum and inform them about her rape. Although Natasha decided to lodge a complaint against those wicked policemen, still Wahid believed she should make her rape case public and involve some Western group or human rights activists or women's rights activists. Natasha explained to him that as a young woman her movements in Sudan are so restricted and she might run into more troubles if she dared to step again out of her relative's house and try to fight a case against the police. She decided not to inform her relatives about her rape. She expected that no one would believe her. Her first 2 days' experience in that male-dominated society taught her that the woman has no place outside of her house. As soon as she steps out of her boundary without a male relative, she would expose herself to many troubles. As if the streets are belonging to men and women have no right to walk in it all alone. It is like the law of the jungle. The weaker animals could not possibly walk freely in the forest without falling prey to the stronger animals. Natasha expected that if she dared to step out of her relative's house all alone, she would face the same or worse problem than that which she had already faced in the first 2 days on her arrival in Sudan. If she dared to go to the police, all police officers are men, and therefore, they would ask her for sexual favor or gang rape her again. And if she hired a lawyer, he would demand the same to fight her case. Besides that, there is nothing called the DNA test to prove gang rape in that Muslim country. Many women tried to complain of being raped by their cousins or uncles, and their complaints turned against them. According to Sharia law, adultery could be proved through confession, pregnancy, or 4 witnesses. If a rape victim goes to the law and said that she has been raped by someone, then she would be required to supply 4 witnesses, or else her complaint would be considered a confession of adultery or slander of an innocent man. And if she gets impregnated through that rape, then her pregnancy would be another evidence of adultery against her. She will be allowed to deliver the baby of her disgraceful pregnancy inside the prison, and then she will be flogged 100 lashes. In some cases, a raped and became pregnant through that rape might rather prefer to kill herself to avoid the consequence of the crime that she is its victim. In Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and other third world countries, a rape victim is expected by society to kill herself. If she refuses to kill herself, then she would either get slain in honor killing by her family or flogged 100 whips or stoned to death by the Sharia court. The last choice for that misfortunate girl is to run away from home and become a prostitute in another city or country.